Hi, my name is Leandro Facchinetti, and in this video I want to show you two projects that I have been working on. They are somewhat related. They both have to do with recording in OBS and editing in REAPER, and they are two separate things, but they are related. And it comes in many parts, and there are different ways of doing all the things I'm going to talk about, so you can navigate in the chapters below in this video and you can find the parts that you care about. So to begin with, I'm going to show you what these projects are. They are, one part is you are recording in OBS and you want to edit in REAPER. And as you are recording, as you're speaking to the camera, you are making markers and you're saying, okay, this is a part that is a highlight and I want to make sure I include this in the final edit. Or I made a mistake here, so you put a marker there, and then later when you're editing, you can jump just to the parts that you need to edit, which makes things a lot faster. You don't have to watch all the footage, which is especially useful if you are streaming when you are recording as well and you just want to do some stream highlights or the kind of video that I do. Of course, that's why I built the tool. In the kind of video that I do, I usually just edit out the mistakes I make. I don't need to re-watch the entire thing that I recorded. So I built this script that allows you to import the markers that you are putting when you're recording in OBS. You can include these markers, and then later in REAPER, you can import all this. So that's project number one. Project number two is a remote controller for OBS that you can use from a different machine. In fact, when I am recording this, I am using the remote controller here on my computer to see myself, and I can include markers. I'm going to give you an example. So as I am recording this, I can... Did you see that marker? So yeah, I'm including markers here that later will show up in REAPER, and I can just edit these parts. So I have this preview window that is running on a different computer, not the one that I'm recording in. So this is a setup in case you have multiple computers to work with. It doesn't have to be an excellent computer. I mean, as you can probably tell from seeing the preview here, it is relatively low quality, and that's on purpose because you may have some computer that is old or just laying around, and you can use that as a preview window. And it also allows you to include markers and everything, and it allows you to switch to different scenes. So that's what I just did. I switched it to a scene that has my face and my computer, and I did that using the remote controller. It also allows me to include the markers, and then later I will be able to import these markers in REAPER. But before I jump into REAPER, I want to show you what the interface looks like, because I kind of showed you with the laptop, but I think it's useful for you to see what the interface looks like on the big screen. So what I have here in front of me is the main interface, and I have OBS running on my machine. So that what you're seeing right now is very meta. This whole video is super meta. So what you're seeing right now is my main computer, not this laptop. It's not this one. It's the main computer in which I'm recording, and OBS is running here, and I am in this scene right now. And now I'm going to connect. So now I have two remote controllers connected. I have the remote controller here on my laptop, the one that I'm actually using to see myself and to put the markers in. But I also have this other view here in which the remote controller is connected to an OBS instance running on my own machine. So it doesn't matter where your OBS instance is running. It can be on another machine on the network. It can be on your own machine on a different display. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, so here in this interface, the way this interface works is with the keyboard. So this is designed to work with a separate computer and with a dedicated keyboard. So you have this window in focus all the time, which is the case as you saw here on my laptop. So as you can see here on the bottom, I have some statistics, and that helps figure out if I am having encoding issues, if I am skipping frames, or if my CPU is too high, and if I'm keeping the frame rate that I want to use for the video. So that is just a way for me to see what's going on. But I can also switch to different scenes. And the way you switch to different scenes is when you are preparing your scenes here in OBS, you have to follow this convention of putting some keyboard shortcuts in brackets, the square brackets, as you can see here. So I'm going to open the controller side by side with OBS. And as you can see here, my scenes are labeled with this square brackets and some keyboard shortcuts. They are the numbers on the keyboard. And I think that's useful when you have another computer dedicated with a keyboard dedicated to recording. It's super easy to just type in one of the numbers in the keyboard and jump to a different scene. But now I'm going to do this on my main computer just to show how things work. So I just typed the number 1 and I switched to scene number 1. Here I typed the number 2 and I switched to scene number 2. And now I can type in the number 3, I switched to scene number 3. So you can come up with any number of scenes, and as long as you put a keyboard shortcut in brackets, this interface will pick up the keyboard shortcut and it will just work. So you can put any letters on the keyboard, they can be your keyboard shortcuts, or things like capital letters. So if instead of like the letter M, you want to use the capital letter M, then you can maybe enable caps lock or hit Shift M. That all works. And then for the markers, this is how it works. So you have here your remote controller in focus, and you just type the spacebar. You hit the spacebar, and as you hit the spacebar, it puts this giant marker on the screen, which I think is cute. The point is, it's recording that point in time. It's recording this time code, and it's also going to produce a file that we can later import in REAPER for editing. So let's see how that works. So I have here, I'm putting a lot of markers just so we can see them on the timeline. And now when I am done, suppose that I have stopped recording, and that's, again, this video is super meta. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to stop recording and restart. So everything up to this point in the video is going to become the file that we are going to work on in the next part of the video. See you on the side of this edit. Okay, I am on the other side of the edit. I have stopped and restarted the recording, and now I am ready to work with the file that I just produced. So I have the recording already in my recordings folder. It is this first one right here. The second one is the one we are recording just now. And I also need the markers. So the way this works is, if with the interface here open in front of me, I just hit return on the keyboard or enter if you are on a PC, and you have to allow downloads. But as you can see, it downloaded this file. It's a CSV file that goes along with your video file. So as I said, this first one is the video file we were just recording. Now I also have the CSV file that goes along with it. So now let's jump into REAPER and see how we can import the CSV file and how we turn it into markers. So the first thing we have to do is just drag and drop the video into REAPER. And now we can select the item here in REAPER, go to the Actions menu and look for Liafac OBS. So yeah, it's this action right here. Import take markers from OBS Controller. InfoWriter, I will talk about this in a moment. CSV file. So OBS Controller is the name I gave to this interface right here that we were using to put in the markers. There is another way of doing this that I'm going to show in the next chapters here below. It's to use this tool that already exists. It produces files in exactly the same format. So it doesn't matter if you are using OBS Controller or if you're using InfoWriter, this other tool. I did not develop InfoWriter, that one already existed. I did develop everything else I'm showing in this video. So if you are using InfoWriter, and it makes more sense if you have a single machine in which you are both recording and you are controlling, you're putting in the markers. That makes more sense if you're using InfoWriter. I think that's the scenario to use InfoWriter. In any case, both OBS Controller, my tool, and InfoWriter produce CSV files with the same format. So you can use this same action with any kind of file you produce. And the way this works is, If there is a video file and a CSV file with exactly the same name, except for the extension, of course, if they have exactly the same name, then this is going to just import that. If it cannot find a CSV file with exactly the same name, it will ask you for a file. But that's not the case. We have a CSV file with exactly the same name, and my tool will produce CSV files that have already that name. It will follow the convention of the recording file you're producing. So all you have to do is just hit run, and then as you can see here back in Reaper, zoom out, and there are our markers. They were all at the end of the video when I was demonstrating markers on my main computer in which I'm recording. So there you go. The markers are right here, and I can just jump to these points in time and do my edits and be done with the video much quicker. So those are the two projects I want to show. The way to import markers into Reaper, that's a rescript that works in Reaper, and this other project that is the remote controller for OBS. In fact, you can use the remote controller even if you are not using Reaper to edit. And you can use this rescript with InfoWriter. So they are two independent projects that work well together. Now let's talk about InfoWriter. If you decide to use InfoWriter instead of my OBS controller to produce the CSV file in the end of the day, first you'll have to install InfoWriter, and I'm going to show you that in the next chapter here in this video. But once you have that installed, you will have to come here. I have this auxiliary scene, so now you see my face blown up and not the computer. Okay, so maybe I'll put, yeah, okay. I usually do this on the auxiliary scene, but because this video is so meta, I cannot. What I have to do instead is put it on this scene, because then you can see my face as well as what I have here on the screen. So the way you do this is you add an InfoWriter source, and this source is, first, it doesn't have to always be active, so I can jump to another scene and this will work just fine. Doesn't really matter. The main important thing here is that the source is in one scene, whatever scene. I find this setup kind of weird, but it works. Now for the log file, you can do this default log file, but there is something super important. You have to change the output format to CSV, right? Remember how we were working with CSVs in Reaper. So the log file, you can go with this one, but I don't like it. In fact, you can put this on your videos folder, and you can use a pattern that looks like year and month and day and space, and then hours and minutes and seconds as well. So yeah, I think that the pattern looks like this, .csv. The cool thing about using this pattern is that it will replace the year, month, day, hour, minutes, and seconds, which gives you a file with exactly the same naming convention as the default naming convention in OBS. So if you did not change the settings in OBS, then this will produce a file that will just work with the video files you're producing. Remember that in Reaper, it is more convenient if you don't have to find the CSV in your file system, if it's just named the same as your video file, which is what's going to happen here. And you can put in some text, and if you do, then they will show up here in Reaper in the markers, the text that you put over here. So if you want that, you can do that. And if you want to, you can log the scene changes. So as I jump between scenes, you can log that, and they will become markers in Reaper as well. If it's something that maybe when you are switching to a different scene, you want to do some kind of edit. So maybe there is a scene that is in your stream, you have something like technical difficulties, I will be back in a moment. And then you want to log that scene change, because when editing for some stream highlights for YouTube, you can get rid of that scene. So it's convenient to have some scene changes logged. I don't find that useful myself, so in the OBS controller, the web interface that I actually use, the one I showed you before, I don't have that feature. If you really want that feature, then get in touch and maybe I will add it, but I don't find this super useful, but it's there. So the way I usually do is just turn this off, and then OK, and then on the Reaper, in OBS settings, in the preferences, there will be hotkeys for InfoWriter. After you have installed, as I'm going to show you, in the next chapters. Then there will be these hotkeys, and you can assign them to your keyboard. So this is a good setup if you have only one computer and you are doing your stream and you're doing your recording all in one place, and your hotkeys are here as well. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for me because as of this recording, I am running on a Mac Mini, the new ones with the M1 processor, and for whatever reason, the keyboard shortcuts, the global keyboard shortcuts, the ones you assign in this screen, don't work in Macs with the M1 processor. I have no idea why. So InfoWriter would not even be an option for me. And there is also another downside of InfoWriter, which is you get no visual feedback that you have made a marker, that you included a marker. While in my little web interface here, you do see that big marker on the screen. So, which I guess makes sense, right? If you have another computer, then it makes sense to show a big marker on the screen. If all you have is just one computer in which you're doing everything, you don't want to see that big marker in the middle of your recording, right? So it's a trade-off. So let's dive deeper into how you can install and configure all these different tools. And there are different ways of doing this, so make sure you check the parts that you care about in the description below. So let's start with how to install the web interface, this OBS controller. So there will be a link here in the description below for you to follow, and you will get here to this giant wall of text, and all you have to do is save this. So it will be an HTML file. Make sure that the format is just HTML. You don't want any of this web archive or whatever your browser may do to the file. You definitely want just this text that is the HTML file. And you can save this anywhere. I will save this to my downloads folder so it doesn't get mixed up with the version that I already had. So you can see that my downloads folder is completely empty. So I can save this here. And I don't want to append any extensions. So now I can find here in the downloads folder that HTML file, no extra extensions, no shenanigans. I can just open that HTML file and it will go to the default place, which is the current machine on port 4444. That's the default, but I can force this to fail. So let me show how this may fail. So the connection is succeeding because it's connecting to the default place where, so let's go to maybe localhost 4445. So, okay, so if you don't configure OBS WebSockets, I'll talk about this in a moment. If you don't configure OBS WebSockets, then the default is for OBS WebSockets to run in localhost 4444. So my tool will just connect to that. But as I said, if you're running on a different machine, which is the case from the perspective of my monitoring laptop, what I had to do here was I had to type in how to find my machine. So I looked at the address for my machine in Mac OS. In Windows, this is different. You have to go to network preferences or something. But in Mac OS, all you'll have to do is come here to sharing and look at this address. So that's what I did. I went to localhost, not localhost, liafac local 4444, and I don't use a password, but if you do use a password, you can just put that here and then connect. And then you're good to go. And this interface is very bare bones. You just see a big preview window and then some statistics at the bottom, and that's on purpose. I wanted the thing to be simple and get out of the way. So that's how you install and use this HTML file by itself. But there is another way of doing this, which is also how you operate this rescript here, how you install the rescript. But anyway, I'm going to show you how to use a REAPER web interface that you usually use to control REAPER, but in this case we are controlling OBS instead, so it's kind of weird, but you can do that. So I'm going to show later how to install all this, but once you have it installed, you can come to Preferences and here under Plugins, no, not Plugins, but under Control OSC Web, add a new web browser interface and then look for OBS Controller. and then it will give you an address that will look like this, and you can go visit that address in your browser. Keep in mind that all of this is running on your machines. There is no centralized server, there is no sharing of information. I will never know what you are doing with this. I'm not tracking. So it's all local. Don't worry, even if you're recording something that is commercial or private, it's all free. Just go ahead, do it. I won't know. Okay, so that is how you use the web interface, both as a standalone file, an HTML file living in your file system, you just open it, or as a web browser interface that you run in Reaper, but you actually use it to control OBS, which is something you can do. And also, if you are using this on a different machine, for instance, in this case, I am in this machine, I am using this to control this other machine, it is nice to bookmark this. If this address is something that you can bookmark, and it will always go to the correct address, and it will even have your password already filled in. It should be okay because it's your own machine anyway, but you can just bookmark this and then go to that address every time. Or if you're running the Reaper web browser interface, you can bookmark that address that I showed you before. So that's something you can do. Now for this next part, I want to show you how to install my tools, my rescripts in Reaper. And it also installs the web interface if you want to run that web interface using Reaper, or if you want to just have the file more conveniently placed instead of having to come here and download this wall of text. So the way you do this is you go to one of the links in the description below, and you will find this place where there is a link that you can use with Repack. If you're new to Reaper and to Repack, then make sure you watch this video by the Reaper blog. He explains how to install Repack, and there are other follow-up videos if you need to install Repack, for instance, on a Mac Mini with the M1 processor. I actually followed that other follow-up video to learn how to do that on my computer. And you can just follow the instructions you find on the Repack website as well. They work well. So after you have this link, you will have to, have installed Repack, but you can come here to import repositories, just paste that URL, hit OK, make sure you install all the packages. So there is this configuration here in Repack in Manage Repositories. This shows up the first time you install Repack, but make sure you enable this install new packages when synchronizing. It will just install everything, and they are not huge, so it's okay to just install everything. So after you have done this, you will have the action that I showed you before, the one that imports the take markers from OBS Controller or InfoWriter. And you will also have that web interface that I showed you before. It will just show up here as another option for web interfaces. So you can come here to the preferences and OBS Controller will be there. So that's what you need to do. That's what you need to do to install everything that I developed. So it will come with the HTML file as well. And if you are interested in just looking at the HTML file raw, you can come here to Options and Show Reaper Resource Path in Finder, and under Reaper www.root, there is our OBS controller. In fact, you can double click that and it's just running right now. So you don't need Reaper if you don't want to, if you don't need the Reaper web interface if you don't want that. You can just open this HTML file as a raw HTML file and it just works. So that's everything about how to install things with Repack and get everything into Reaper. Now, if you are interested in doing InfoWriter instead, for whatever reason, then there will be the link to InfoWriter in the description below, and this is what you have to do. So this one is similar, it's slightly more convoluted. You have to come here to the releases and you have to, mostly you just have to follow the instructions. I'm going to show you what I did to make this work. So I came here to the releases and I downloaded the one for my operating system, and I dragged and dropped the file into the right place for my operating system. So I can come here to the downloads folder, and here is the file I just downloaded. And in my operating system, the instructions are here in the link that I'm going to share. But in my case, I have to go into OBS, and that's the part that I want to show because it's kind of awkward. What you have to do is go to the applications folder, and I guess you can come here, and yeah, so applications is right here. Then you have to find OBS, and you have to show package contents, come into here and plugins, and then in here you will drag and drop this file. I already did this before recording. That's how I was able to show you InfoWriter in action in OBS before. But what you have to do is just drag and drop this into the plugins folder, and then you have to stop and restart OBS. And then you will have InfoWriter, and you will be able to configure it as I showed you in the previous chapters in this video. And that is it. That is pretty much the whole story. I developed two different tools. One is a rescript to import markers into Reaper so you do your edits much faster. The second is a remote controller for OBS that does allow you to include the markers, but you can also use InfoWriter if you prefer. And that's an ideal setup if you have a separate computer that you can use just for monitoring. And that's how I'm recording my videos right now, and I think it's working out great. So thanks for watching this one. I hope you liked this, and if you did, make sure you subscribe to the channel, you support me on Patreon, on PayPal, and just leave a comment saying that this helped. I hope it did. Thanks for watching. I see you on the next one. Bye.